Cyclone Ilsa has caused millions of dollars worth of damage in Western Australia's Pilbara region. It has now been downgraded to a tropical low, but will continue to produce damaging winds in inland parts of WA and also parts of the Northern Territory. Well, joining me live is the WA Department of Fire and Emergency Services Incident Controller, Glenn Hall. Glenn, thank you so much for your time. The strongest cyclone to hit in 14 years. It didn't get a lot of populated areas, but we've still seen a lot of damage, millions of dollars worth.
Yeah, hello Janie and to your viewers. Tropical Cyclone Ilsa, Category 5 system, it certainly was a strong system as it passed through. But in my team, we've threaded the needle, thankfully, and Mother Nature's been on our side and it hasn't passed over any populated centres. And thankfully that's resulted in no injuries or death. There has been some damage, as we've seen, to the Pardew area and some inland pastoral stations to sheds and buildings. Most of the main buildings, homesteads, the reports that I'm getting is the damage to those is minimal, which is very thankful. Our next concern as it moves inland and it transitions into the Northern Territory is the impact of flooding and the isolation issues that may bring to eastern desert communities.
Absolutely, and even though it's now a tropical low, it still packs a punch. I was talking to an oceanographer yesterday, a cyclone expert, Glenn, and he described the Category 5 cyclone, the energy equivalent to powering the US for 6 months. I mean, that is an extraordinary analogy and just an example of how powerful it was. Of course, a lot of that energy was out to sea, but as it moves inland, as you mentioned, still more damage, flooding and the likes.
Yeah, and that's a great example of just what we were dealing with and the fact that it did increase to Category 5 intensity just before it hit the coast. And that's why we had the preparations in place. That's why that we were here days before impact, doing all the preparations that we had. We had some relocations of some vulnerable persons from the Aboriginal community of Bidjadanga, and I can only commend their preparedness. Thankfully, they weren't affected, but we were prepared nonetheless. We had resources both in the Pilbara and the Kimberley ready to mobilise, our urban search and rescue resources, our state emergency service volunteers, all ready to go. And we've got people on the ground now conducting some work, but thankfully it's not to the extent that we were expecting.
Well, it's always good to hear better news, isn't it? Because we prepare for the worst and we hope for the best. And again, places like Pardew Roadhouse have been damaged and destroyed. And our hearts certainly go to those people who have had so much damage, and we continue to see that clean-up and a great effort by you and so many of the other emergency services, and also the rescues and the preparedness as well. So as we mentioned, it is going to move across to the Northern Territory. I'm not sure, in the next few days where the system is actually going to go. I mean, sometimes we do have cyclones redeveloping. I haven't heard anything there yet. We'll have to speak to our weather team. But regardless, again, of cyclones or not, still tropical lows can provide gusty winds, and we've certainly seen our fair share of severe thunderstorm warnings as well.
Yeah, certainly, and even while the system was still crossing inland, we had a severe weather warning issued for the community of Bidjadanga and inland areas, and thankfully overnight we didn't see any impact to that, thankfully. And as the system degraded from category cyclone intensity, it was transitioning to a severe weather warning. We've checked with those eastern desert communities this morning, and again, no issues, apart from the expectations for we may need to respond to some flooding issues, but we'll see what happens over today and the coming days.
Well, Glenn Hall, we really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, and all the best with the clean-up, and well done on a great effort, and we'll talk to you again soon.